You're scared of what you're feeling, aren't you?
I don't feel anything. Every time I try to move on, he pull me back. Don't care for me anymore.
Hyungwoo, don't try to run away from me.
Minho, don't go.
It's too late. It's always too late with you.
Hyungwoo, we look good together, don't we?
Minho, I love you.
Minho, I love you.
It was a quiet Saturday morning when Minho sat up in bed, rubbing his eyes. But something felt different. The usual noise, the warmth of Jisoo's presence, gone. The room was empty. Minho was confused. He made his way to the kitchen, only to find Jisoo standing by the counter, staring at the floor. His usual energy and bright smile were missing. Before Minho could ask, Jisoo finally spoke. "Your mom called," he said, his voice unusually quiet. "Your grandma's condition. It's a little serious." The words hit Minho like a weight pressing against his chest. Without thinking, he made up his mind. "I have to go to Seoul." He rushed upstairs, and within minutes, he was ready to leave. But as he came downstairs, a voice made him stop. Hyungwoo cleared his throat. "I'll drive you to Seoul," he said, standing near the door. Minho blinked in surprise. "What?" Hyungwoo's face remained unreadable. "Today's my day off." Before Minho could respond, Jisoo grinned. "I asked him to go with you." And just like that, the journey began. It was the coldest journey Minho had ever taken. Hyungwoo barely spoke. Less than 10 words the entire drive. Minho spent the next few hours in Seoul with his grandmother, feeling warmth in a way he hadn't in a long time. But his parents decided to stay longer, leaving Minho with no choice but to return alone. Or rather, return to Jisoo's house. Back under the same roof as Hyungwoo. With exams around the corner, Minho had no choice but to study. But he didn't want to. He used to be a bright student, but somewhere along the way, between moving from place to place, between the loneliness, he lost his interest in studying. Jisoo was the same. They would sit in the room, staring at books, pretending to study, especially when Hyungwoo was home. But that night, Hyungwoo wasn't home, so they decided to watch a movie instead. Minho stepped out to buy snacks, but as he walked to the shop, he stopped in his tracks. There, just across the road, stood Hyungwoo, and he wasn't alone. A man dressed in a black hoodie and a black face mask stood beside him. Their conversation was low, tense. And then, Hyungwoo looked up. Their eyes met. Minho swallowed. The man in the hoodie turned suddenly and walked away, disappearing into the night. Hyungwoo watched him go before finally turning back to Minho. His face was calm, but his hands were clenched into fists. "What are you doing here?" Hyungwoo asked, his voice sharper than usual. Minho crossed his arms. "Do I need permission to walk around?" Hyungwoo sighed, rubbing his temple. "This is how you two are studying." His voice was laced with frustration. "I thought you were different, Minho." Minho frowned. "What?" Hyungwoo's eyes darkened. "I called Jisoo 10 minutes ago. He told me you were writing a paper." Minho froze. Before he could answer, Hyungwoo exhaled, his expression softening just slightly. "Just promise me," he said. "You'll study hard and get good grades this time." Slowly, Minho nodded. "I promise." Hyungwoo studied him for a moment longer, then turned and walked toward the hospital. It was the longest conversation he had ever had with Minho. Minho stood there, his heart still pounding, because of Hyungwoo's words and that man. Both were strange. Minho started noticing things about Hyungwoo. He always made coffee for himself in the morning. Always. Even if he was exhausted. He even made coffee for Jisoo and Minho. That morning, Minho went to the balcony just after waking up. Then he saw the man in the black mask again, standing outside, watching the house. Moments later, Hyungwoo walked out, heading straight toward him. Minho rushed to the kitchen. Jisoo was making coffee. Hyungwoo's mug sat untouched. "Hyung left early today." Jisoo mumbled through a yawn. Minho frowned. "For what?" Jisoo stretched. "Dunno. He never says anything. Just disappears like Batman." But Minho knew better. He wanted to meet that man. 2 days before exams, Minho stayed up late, studying. The house was quiet. Jisoo had fallen asleep half an hour ago. Minho was reading his notes when the front door unlocked. Minho tensed. A moment later, Hyungwoo stepped inside. He glanced at Minho for just a second. "Where's Jisoo?" "Asleep," Minho answered. Hyungwoo nodded and walked toward the kitchen. Without thinking, Minho said, You forgot your coffee this morning. Hyungwoo paused. It was urgent. A surgery. But Minho knew he was lying. The house was quiet. Minho still sat at the dining table, reading his notes. Then, he heard a sound of footsteps. It was Hyungwoo, wearing black sweatpants and a loose t-shirt, slightly damp from the steam of his shower. He looked effortlessly handsome. Minho quickly looked down at his notes. Hyungwoo walked past him without a word, heading straight for the kitchen. He heard the sound of cabinets opening and the soft clatter of glass. Minho turned his head slightly and saw Hyungwoo reaching for the first aid kit. Minho frowned. First aid? Hyungwoo barely reacted as he pulled out a bottle of disinfectant, flipping it open. But as he stretched his hand toward the counter, Minho saw it. A long, deep cut along his palm. A wound that didn't look accidental. Minho stood up before he could stop himself. Are you hurt? It's nothing, Hyungwoo muttered, reaching for the cotton. But before he could, Minho grabbed his wrist. His gaze dropped to the cut. It wasn't fresh, but it was deep. The kind that came from a blade, not an accident. His grip tightened. What happened? Hyungwoo's expression didn't change, but Minho could feel the tension in his arm. A heartbeat passed, then another. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, Hyungwoo pulled his wrist away. Not harshly, but firmly. It's not important, he said. Minho clenched his fists. He wanted to push, to demand an answer, but the way Hyungwoo stood, closed off, guarded, made it clear. The days passed in a blur of exams and studying. Hyungwoo was busy at the hospital. Minho's parents had returned, and he finally moved back home. Days later, exams ended, and vacation finally started. This time, Minho and Jisoo had done better than before in the exam, but Hyungwoo didn't say anything about their progress. It hurt Minho. One afternoon, Minho and Jisoo sat outside in Jisoo's garden. Something's weird with Hyungwoo, Minho muttered. Jisoo, stretched out on the grass beside him, cracked an eye open. What do you mean? Lowering his voice, Minho told Jisoo everything. About the late-night call, the man in the black mask, and the wound on Hyungwoo's hand. You noticed it too, right? Minho pressed. He's acting normal now, but something feels off. Jisoo frowned. He had noticed it too. Let's find out, Jisoo said, determination flashing in his eyes. The weekend approached, and Minho and Jisoo had planned to go to a music concert near the beach. But 2 days before, Jisoo caught a cold and had a fever. Hyungwoo handed him some medicine. Take this and rest. Jisoo pouted. But the concert? Don't go, Hyungwoo said flatly, not even looking up. The next day, Minho checked on Jisoo. He seemed to be recovering, but not fully. As they talked, Jisoo suddenly grinned dramatically. Minho, you're going to the concert. Minho blinked. Wait, you're telling me to go without you? Jisoo nodded. Yeah, you should still go. I already bought the tickets. Minho stared at him. Why would I go alone? Jisoo smirked. Who said you'd be alone? Minho's stomach dropped. As if on cue, Hyungwoo walked in, dressed in his usual crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up, probably just back from the hospital. Jisoo turned to him, grinning. Hyung, you're free tomorrow evening, right? Hyungwoo gave his younger brother a bored glance. What? Jisoo clapped his hands together. Because you're taking Minho to the concert. Minho choked on air. What? He spluttered. Jisoo pouted dramatically. Come on, Hyung. Minho's been counting the days for this. The band is his favorite. Do this favor for me. Hyungwoo sighed, rubbing his temple. Okay. Minho opened his mouth to protest, but it was too late. The next evening, Hyungwoo drove in silence. Minho, arms crossed, stared out the window. The silence stretched, thick and awkward. After what felt like an eternity, Minho finally sighed. You don't have to act like I don't exist. I'm driving, Hyungwoo replied coldly. Minho stole a glance at him. By the time the concert ended, the sun had set. The crowd buzzed with energy, but Minho couldn't find Hyungwoo anywhere. He sighed, stretching his arms before wandering toward the beach. And then he saw him, standing by the shoreline, hands in his pockets, gazing at the waves. Minho walked closer and noticed something between Hyungwoo's fingers. A cigarette. Minho blinked. You smoke. Hyungwoo didn't answer. Silence stretched between them. Minho shifted on his feet before asking, Why do you seem different here? Hyungwoo exhaled slowly, watching the smoke disappear into the night. Because no one expects anything from me here. Minho didn't know what to say to that. But before he could think of a response, Hyungwoo flicked his cigarette away, stuffing his hands back into his pockets. "Let's go," he said, already turning toward the road. Minho bit his lip. The drive back was silent. Hyungwoo's words looped in Minho's mind, over and over again. When they reached Jisoo's house, it was late. Jisoo fell asleep almost immediately, snoring softly. Minho lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He felt restless, unsettled. Finally, he got up to get some water. As he passed the study, he noticed Hyungwoo's door was slightly open. That was unusual. Hyungwoo always closed his door. He wasn't the type to be careless. Something about it felt off. Slowly, Minho stepped forward and pushed the door open just a little more. Inside, Hyungwoo sat at his desk, asleep. His head rested on his folded arms, his breathing slow and steady. On the desk, there was a glass of water and some tablets. Minho stepped closer, cautiously. And then, Hyungwoo moved. Minho barely had time to react before a strong, warm hand wrapped around his wrist. Hyungwoo's eyes were still half-lidded, heavy with sleep, but his grip tightened as he pulled Minho closer. Minho's heart pounded. Hyungwoo's fingers curled around his wrist, like he was afraid to let go. "Stay with me." The words were barely above a whisper, but they sent a shiver down Minho's spine. And then Hyungwoo leaned in. Minho could feel the warmth of his breath, the slight tremble in his grip. His mind screamed at him to step back, to say something, but he couldn't move. For a moment, time slowed. Minho swallowed hard. His free hand hovered in the air. Should he push him away? Hold on tighter? His chest ached. What was his feeling? And then, Hyungwoo's eyes snapped open. Everything changed. Minho barely had a second to react before Hyungwoo yanked his hand away. It wasn't rough, but it was final. "Go away," Hyungwoo said coldly. Minho stared, his pulse still racing. Hyungwoo turned away, his hands clenching at his sides. Minho wanted to say something, but instead, he walked back to his room, his wrists still burning from Hyungwoo's touch. He couldn't sleep. He groaned, covering his face with his hands. The next morning, Hyungwoo acted like nothing had happened. Minho kept glancing at him during breakfast, expecting some kind of reaction, but Hyungwoo didn't even look at him. And for some reason, that irritated Minho more than anything, because no matter how much he wanted to deny it, Hyungwoo had become someone special in his life, and there was no turning back.